welcome back to my channel, unless of course you're new here, in which case, hi, hello. My name is Ashley and welcome to my random little corner of the internet. As you can tell from today's title, I'm basically going to be doing a giant haul of all of the books that I've bought while being stuck at home. Most everybody is still supposed to be self-quarantining, self-isolating, staying at home, things like that. And what else are you gonna do but read or things? I don't know. There is quite a bit of a pile here, so I wanted to do that now before the mountain got bigger. But some of the books that I am going to be talking about are books that I've already talked about, be it in one of my wrap-up videos or in a book box. So we're just going to get into it. Alright, first up is going to be this stack. This is books that I've already talked about in my wrap-ups. We have Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I'm not going to talk about the synopsis for any of the ones that I've already talked about in previous videos, but I will link those videos down below just in case you wanted to know what they are. So first off, Heartless by Marissa Meyer, retelling of Queen of Hearts and how she came to be, prequel maybe, like backstory. And then we have Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. Some really, really pretty books. And we have The Sea Witch by Sarah Henning. All of these books I had purchased in April to go with the Owls readathon. They were probably they were the first set of books that I bought on being on lockdown. I guess after that we can go with the books that I've talked about that I've gotten in LitJoy Crate. So obviously in March we got Bonecryer's Moon. In April we got Empire of Dreams by Ray Carson. And in March, April, May. In May, we got The Fascinators by Andrew Eliopoulos. Oh, I'm probably butchering that. But here we go. Alright, and now into books that I have not talked about. We're just going to get into that. Let's see. I bought all 4 of the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, by Sarah J. Maas. They are a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, which I absolutely adore, and they follow the protagonist. His name is Feyre, and she unknowingly kills a fairy and then is brought into the world of the fairies and is living there. And I have read the first book so far, and I am currently reading the second book. The first book I have heard from many, and now I can give my own opinion as well. It is a little slow to start, but once the action gets going, it's really good. The reason that I got it was because of the hype. I'm not gonna lie. They're so popular among so many people, and I have so many of my friends that have recommended it that I knew, and that's the only reason I got through book 1, to be honest, is like, if I did not already know that so many people love it, I probably wouldn't have finished it, but I'm glad that I did. So there we have A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, and A Court of Frost and Starlight. Not to mention, all of these books are really pretty too, because they have like a sheen to all of them. Alrighty, the next 2. So, every time that I go to Goodwill, I will pop into the book section, just because you never know what you might find. I know a couple of months I talked about how I found all 6 of the Mortal Instrument books and the 3 Infernal Devices, and I paid like $11 for all 9. So one day I walked in and I found Scarlet by Marissa Meyer, so I went ahead and also bought Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and it is another set of retellings. It basically takes the fairy tales that we know and throws in some robots and some cyborgs and people living on the moon, and there we go. The main reason why I picked them up, like, it was always a thing that I wanted to read them because I had friends talk about them, but then after reading Renegades, which I've talked about 1,000 times, I completely fell in love with Marissa Meyer, so I knew that I was going to have to read literally everything that she ever writes. So, yeah. Let's see. And the next set is the Caraval, I guess? Caraval? trilogy by Stephanie Garber. Again, can we just appreciate the gorgeousness of these books? Like, they're all just shiny and pretty with the foiling. Just gorgeous. Basically, what happens here is there's two sisters, and they are trying to escape their father, because, you know, that's always what happens in these books. Their father's a terrible person, and they have to get away. And the older sister keeps trying to go to Caraval, which is a once-a-year performance, but you have to be invited to go to it. And finally, when she thinks all hope is lost, they finally get invited, and they go, and the younger sister actually gets kidnapped, but then it turns out that it's all part of the performance, because the performance is something that is audience participation, and kind of like a murder mystery kind of thing. So the rest of the story is her finding her sister before she disappears for good. So that is the Caraval trilogy. And then I finally bought The Infinite Noise by Lauren Shippen. I talked about this book in my TBR for 2020, like my whole year TBR. And it follows our two lovely main characters right here. We have Adam and Caleb. And I talked about it a lot in depth in my TBR. And it's by, like I said, it's by Lauren Shippen. And it's based on the podcast that she has. It's called The Bright Sessions. And it's just a wonderful story about two young boys just traversing life. And I believe... okay, for some reason I thought this was college, but it's not. They're still in high school, but it's just their story, which I love. Because in all honesty, they are my favorite characters in the podcast. Alright, next up, I bought Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. Originally, I had purchased this to be part of my Owls, and then I just never got to it. It is about Kath, who has gone to college, and her twin sister, Ren, because their mother never planned on having two children and never expected them to be twins, and so she already had the name Catherine, and so instead of coming up with a second name, she named her twins Kath and Ren. Cather and Ren. Yeah, their mom's a delight. But anyways, it follows Kath, and she has gone off to college, and her twin sister has decided that she wants to start living life not as a twin, basically. Like, growing up, obviously, as a twin, they try to do everything together, and they were best friends, and, you know, it's great. But when you go to college, you want to kind of try to make your own life, and so Ren has gone off to create her own life, and Kath is freaking out. And so she kind of keeps to herself. She writes fan fiction for a book, a series of books called Simon Snow series, which is kind of similar to Harry Potter, but Harry Potter still exists in the universe as well, because one of the characters mentions them. But she meets some boys, and, you know, as you do in college, and makes some mistakes, I guess you could say. But she doesn't, I mean, it was a good read, but I only gave it 4 stars because there's not any sort of, like, major conflict. It's just a very easy, fun-loving story. Everything works out in the end, and it's just a really cute story. I do want to read Carry On, simply because that's supposed to be what her fan fiction is, and it's one of the most popular fan fictions for this story that exists, and she gets millions of hits a day, and it's really, really popular. And then she's majoring in fiction writing, and then she starts psyching herself out, because what if she's only really good at writing fan fiction and not creating her own world? And as someone who writes fan fiction, I can agree. Trying to create your own world is insane. I've tried. I can come up with some names, and that's about it. But if you give me a world that's already been created and I get to twist them into whatever I want, it's so much easier. But Cass figures it out. Alright, next up, I talked about going to Goodwill and how I always check the book section. Another great place to find books is the Dollar Tree. It makes me laugh. But, like, when I went a couple days ago, and I get up to the cashier, and my cashier grabs the books, and she's like, "Do you know how much these are really worth?" Yeah, that's why I checked the section. I'm paying $1 for these books that are usually pretty decent. So, first off, I mean, and they're usually books that I've never actually heard of, but they end up being pretty decent. So the first one is The Hanged Man by P N L Rod. And basically, this young lady on the cover is a psychic reader, and she starts working for the Queen. She's working with the Queen plus the police to help, like, find murderers and things like that. So she's kind of like a Sherlock Holmesy, but psychic. So that one sounds really interesting because I love Sherlock Holmes. The next one is The Possibility of Somewhere by Julia Day. This one's just another really sweet story of finding love where you least expect it kind of thing. It says it follows a young man named Ash Gupta, and he is just trying to get through his senior year, and he's doing everything that his parents want him to do. And then he meets this girl, and she's a very quiet, like, she's supposed to be the valedictorian, and she's stereotypically valedictorian. Like, not in my high school, where our valedictorian was also, like, a football player and involved in multiple clubs and stuff like that. Like, she is a very geeky, stereotypical, keeps to herself, quiet, nerdy valedictorian. And, so that's what Possibility of Somewhere is, because, you know, you never know where you might find the perfect person. The next one, because, again, it caught my eye. I'm a sucker for the shiny. It's called Oliver Loving by Stephen Merrill Block. Something happened. It takes place in Texas, which is awesome because I live in Texas. It takes place in West Texas, and something happens, and Oliver is, like, he's alive, but he is paralyzed, and he's awake, but he's kind of in a coma. And it seems very confusing, but there is some sort of supernatural aspect to it, and it definitely I gotta read it. So, again, I only paid $1 for each of the 3 of those, and that's amazing because they could be life-changing. They could end up being my favorite book, and you never know. Don't ever discount going to the Dollar Tree section, or the book section of your Dollar Tree. Alright, so the next section, there's gonna be quite a bit of classics. My grandmother is, currently downsizing in her home and downsizing to a smaller home because, as you know, the age of a grandmother, she is living alone and doesn't work full time because she's retired. She just can't afford to live in the big house that she does, and so she's downsizing to a smaller home, and therefore she is kind of relinquishing, like, giving away things to grandchildren and children and all that like that. And so she called me yesterday, and she had me come and look through her books, a lot of them, because it's her books plus my great grandmother's books when she moved into a nursing home, because my great grandmother is alive as well. When she moved into the assistant living home that she is, my grandmother ended up with all of her stuff. And so a lot of it are like the Reader's Digest books and things like that, or like sets of books, but I did get a few of them. So we have Nancy Drew number 3, which is The Bungalow Mystery, and the Hardy Boys number 1, which is The Tower Treasure. My daughter is starting to read more advanced books, and I've gotten her a couple of Nancy Drews, and she's really liked them. So I wanted to make sure that I grabbed these for her because I think she will really enjoy them. Again, I already talked about loving Sherlock Holmes, and so she had this copy of The Return of Sherlock Holmes. They're just really pretty. They're definitely like classic style, but they're just these really nice naked books. But they just look so nice on a bookshelf that I obviously am still going to read them. But The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and other stories. So there are other stories in here, but for the main part, it is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We have The Grapes of Wrath. I don't know if I'll ever actually read this, but the fact that at least I own it gives me a better chance of actually reading it. And like the embossing of the grapes on the cover. It's really cool. These are they're just very nice looking books too. This one is The Celebrated Jumping Frog and Other Stories. I have never heard of this, but it went along with the other classics. It is written by Mark Twain. So if anything, it's another set that my daughter can read. And then this one caught my eye because it's called Kim, and it's by Rudyard Kipling, which is the same person who wrote The Jungle Book, So my thoughts is it's going to be kind of along those lines, with this really, it's this green and gold elephant on the cover with someone writing it. We're going to assume that's Kim. If you have read it and you want to yell at me in the comments because I'm an idiot and I've never heard of it, go for it. And then the very last book that I'm going to talk about is this. It's called Tombstone's Immortals, and it's this tiny little pamphlet kind of thing. It doesn't have an author or anything like that, or maybe it does. Hold on. Oh, this is by Ben T. Trawick, and it was written in 1973. But it's just like tiny little articles / stories of people like Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and like just the Old West. And so I thought it was really fun, and I'm definitely going to read this. So, there it is, guys. Those are so far all of the books that I have purchased, been given, or those are the only options, purchased or been given, while we have been sitting here on quarantine. I've read a chunk of them. There's still so many for me to read, but I've got plenty of time. Alright, and I know I ramble so much, but if you like this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button as well as that big red subscribe button and the notification bell so that you are always notified every time that I upload a video. And until next time, bye!